What's up guys? Jacob with the Barcode Collective. Today we're going to talk a little bit about slow breathing and how doing less is more. We hear about this a lot when we're talking about recovery and wellness and maybe backing off workouts in order to increase performance. Some of that seems very counterintuitive, and whether or not you want to believe it, the respiratory system is actually one that is often talked about as just breathe more, breathe. And that's, I don't blame anybody for that train of thought. That's usually what we're told when we're training and we're gasping for air is to breathe more. But in this case, it's not going to benefit you, and I'll explain a little bit more. So the respiratory system is very complicated. It's more than just the nose and the mouth and the lungs. There are over 1,500 miles of tubes that make up the respiratory system. So you have your sinuses, you have the throat, you bring in air, you think about the lungs and, inhale and the exhale. But there's so much more, from capillaries, the bronchioli, the alveoli. Sounds like an Italian dish, I know, but they're very key components that make up the respiratory system. So let me explain how this whole thing works, and then at the end of it, it might make more sense to how breathing slower is actually going to help you get oxygen into the tissue, which is the main goal, right, of breathing. So think about this as the bus analogy is probably the best way. When you inhale oxygen, it makes it all the way down into the alveoli. Alveoli is like a little bus stop. You got the bus pulling up there. Oxygen jumps onto that bus, and within that bus, there's all these different seats that you can grab a seat in. So the seat is the hemoglobin. So now you have this oxygen chilling in the hemoglobin, flowing through the blood vessels, and at some point it reaches tissue, and that oxygen jumps off that bus, and CO2 jumps on, that carbon dioxide that we talk about a lot about building up. So the CO2 jumps onto the bus, that bus makes its way back into the lungs, and the exhale is the CO2 releasing back out, right? So if that's the analogy, what we need to realize, and even just with that, you can still think about, oh, if I'm just breathing more, there's that same exchange happening. But it wasn't until the Bohr Effect came into place, and there's the discovery that CO2 is so much more than just a waste gas, It's not, the goal isn't just to expel it. It is necessary for the release of oxygen. So it's actually CO2 and the rise of it that tells that oxygen to get off the bus and into the tissue. So without CO2, without the appropriate levels of CO2 within the system, that exchange doesn't happen. And you can see how just a few minutes of over breathing, mouth breathing, or just breathing in excess of the metabolic demand, what that does is it might feel good because you're expelling the CO2, so you have that, you're not dealing with that discomfort of air hunger, so you're expelling the CO2. But what it does, it throws off of the blood gas level within the system, and very quickly your muscles will stop getting oxygen. Without CO2, your blood vessels actually get smaller, blood flow gets restricted, and then obviously oxygen isn't getting delivered to the tissue. So just a few minutes of that will lead to cramps, headaches, you can even black out. And that's why, there's that whole, I don't know if when you were a kid, if you ever did it, but like you have a friend hold you up on a wall and you hyperventilate on purpose. We call that superventilation. And they would hold you up and eventually you would just black out. This is because your blood vessels get small and the oxygen just isn't getting delivered to the brain and to the body. So let's bring it all back. And that hopefully will better explain a little bit how slower breathing nice, slow, and uncontrolled into the nose actually results in more oxygen to the tissues, because your body is increasing CO2, and when you have more CO2 flowing through, you have wider blood vessels. It actually dilates the blood vessels. You have more blood flow, and you have more oxygen exchange into the tissue. So, in this case, less is most definitely more. That's why we talk about breathing through the nose why we do different breath holds. And although Wim Hof is super popular and he does a lot of heavy breathing, a lot of the breathing that we talk about is slow breathing because this is the approach that we're coming from. Most people are very CO2 intolerant because they breathe through the mouth. So by breathing through the nose and us doing more slow breathing, it's going to help you with oxygenating the system more efficiently. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if you guys have any questions. And if you're still wearing your mask, that hopefully connects a few dots to you and why you're getting headaches. But yeah, all right guys, thank you for your time. Check back in next week with another video. See you later.